Nowadays, there are many boy bands and rock bands out in the music industry, but there was one group that is strongly considered to be the first. This band is called the Beatles. The Beatles were the most influential band that impacted the music industry in the 60s. The way they incorporated different styles and instruments in their music is what made them great. My love for the Beatles started in my senior year of high school, when my friend, who's also a big fan of them, introduced me to their music. Since then, I have been listening to them every day for the past 3 years, especially while on a car ride or working out. In this speech, I would like to honor the Beatles, to show my appreciation for their years in the music industry and their hard work by giving you, the audience, a description of who they are as a whole, and maybe even get some of you to listen to their music and enjoy it as I do. First and foremost, I would like to discuss who is in the band and how it came to be in a summarized way, or else we'd be here for hours. Before John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr became the most influential band that shaped new genres of music that is still popular today, they were just teenagers who had a passion for music. A faithful meeting between two music-loving teenagers in 1957 is where it all began. John Lennon was the first to join a band called the Quarrymen, specifically a skiffle band. A skiffle band is a mixture of three different types of music genres: folk music, jazz, and blues. Then Paul McCartney came into the picture. He started to play music with them, and eventually the band members wanted him to permanently be in the band. Then came the next two members who would be a part of the band, which would eventually be known as the Beatles. They were George Harrison and Ringo Starr. Harrison was brought in after Paul got too nervous to be the lead guitarist for one of their performances. So, as mentioned earlier, Harrison was put in his spot to be the lead guitarist. Then finally came the final member of the group, Ringo Starr. The Beatles struggled to find a committed drummer until they came across Ringo. He kept being sick and not showing up for gigs, so we would get Ringo to sit in with us instead. And every time Ringo sat in, it seemed like this is it. Eventually, we realized we should get Ringo in the band full time. Now that you know a good little chunk about the Beatles, now let's get into their accomplishments and how they made a great impact on pop culture. The Beatles were a type of group that didn't want to do the norm. They broke down a lot of barriers using different instruments and mixing sounds. They also managed to make a lot of money for their music and were very corporate minded. The Beatles not only were good at mixing different instruments together to make a unique and beautiful sound, but they were also good at meshing a good transition into their songs. It was so good that you wouldn't really know if you're on a different song or on the same one. A very good example would be the song A Day in a Life. It has a beautiful transition from switching the way they play their instruments, and it even has an orchestra that meshes with their instruments from time to time. The Beatles were such an innovative group of musicians that they got many different deserved awards. The Beatles earned their first career Grammy Awards for 1964, winning Best Performance by a Vocal Group for A Hard Day's Night and Best New Artist. These awards were ones of many that they would end up getting. In total, they received up to 7 Grammy Awards. However, not all great things have a happy ending, and eventually it will crash and burn. The Beatles eventually broke up in the 1970s, but throughout the early years is when the group was losing its spark. They had been trying for days to write and rehearse new material for a scheduled upcoming live show, their first since August 1966. But the task wasn't going well. The only one among them who had any sense of urgency was Paul McCartney. I don't see why any of you, if you're not interested, got yourself into this, he said to the other Beatles. However, many do not think it was the Beatles losing their spark. Many think this was the fault of John Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono, who got into Lennon's head and corrupted the band through him. Whatever the reason actually was for the breakup, the Beatles broke up, and weirdly enough, it happened at Disney World. The Beatles were one of those bands that inspired many other artists to be different with their music, which led them to be one of the most influential and impactful bands to ever get into the music industry. They accomplished more than what any artist would ever want in their lives. They won up to 7 Grammy Awards and had the great fortune of impacting pop culture the way they did. Even though they broke up, their music and story will live on and inspire many more artists.